you want to do these things, you can do them. If you want to wait for a Srebrenica or even a Rwanda or one of those things, you can. But I think that it's pretty clear that just a declaration to start would show a commitment on our part, and it would also, I think, improve the morale of the people who are fearing these attacks.
Would you need the blessing of the UN in some form or other, or not?
I think it's pretty clear the Russians and Chinese would probably not agree. They may, but it's most unlikely since their foreign minister Lavrov said that sanctions were about as far as they can go. I think you could probably get a NATO agreement. What I worry about, David, is that NATO would act after there is more slaughter, which Gaddafi has promised. Now look, Gaddafi may fall tomorrow. His days are numbered. The question is how long are those days going to be, and how much murder and mayhem is he going to be able to inflict on his own citizens before he goes? I think a no-fly zone, and I'm not talking about the slippery slope of now troops on the ground, which I would oppose, but we need to do a lot more in a humanitarian way as well. We could do some covert stuff, you know, like we know how to do pretty well. But the fact is that that declaration, I think, would have a significant impact, a positive impact on the morale of those who are struggling against Gaddafi's better equipped and marginally better trained armed forces that he has.
And people say different things about Gaddafi. You met him, I think, in 2009. Do you think of him as intelligent, in control of his faculties and so on, or do you see him as delusional, or a man taking the wrong track for good reasons or bad reasons? I mean, how do you sum up the man who could be your adversary?
Well, I think anybody who's able to maintain power for 42 years, you should not underestimate. Yeah, I think there's a degree of insanity. You and I are old enough to remember that Hitler was insane too, and so was Stalin, and so have some other very successful and brutal dictators throughout history. But I view him as capable, and I view him as a person who has access to huge amounts of money, and I think he's dispensing a lot of that money now to maintain the loyalty of his mercenaries and perhaps his troops. And again, his forces are not well trained and they're not well organized, but they're a lot better trained and a lot better organized than those civilians who are rising up to try to assert their freedom. That's why I worry to some degree about a possible stalemate, which would then entail significant bloodletting. But please let me be clear, I am not predicting the outcome of events, but I do agree with the President of the United States and the Secretary of the State. Gaddafi must go.
And what about the situation in terms of, people look at the situation of the rebels, brave, the rebels and so on, but sometimes underarmed. Should the West, for instance, support the rebels, if not with soldiers on the ground, but at least with weapons?
Well, I think that has to be a real serious consideration. You know, during the Afghan war, Russian war with Afghanistan and other conflicts, we have supplied arms to the right people. Obviously, there's not a degree of cohesion or organization now that would make that easy. I think we could supply them with things like satellite imagery. I think we could, but right now, I think one of the best things we could do is provide them with the moral support that, and they pay attention. They pay attention to what the United States of America says and what we do.
And what about the situation with Hugo Chavez and getting involved in this situation somewhat, which is an unusual a surprise development and so on, but does that have any meaning to play in all of this?
Well, as you know, he and Gaddafi have a very close relationship. I was very relieved to see him agree to mediate. That pretty well wrapped up any problems that I might have had with the situation. Let me just say that I think that that Chavez is a marginal player here, and it's pretty obvious that he's just sort of weighing in with some rhetoric. The people of Libya will decide their future. I'd like to see them have the kind of assistance that would prevent them from being ultimately killed and maybe ultimately massacred from the air, and I don't think it's that difficult for us to do. It's complex. We'd have to take out the air defenses, which are not that strong, by the way, that the Libyans have, and we would have to do some other things. But overall, I think the world's greatest military power ought to be able to handle this situation fairly well.
But it could become a bombing battle, in a sense.
I don't think so. His Air Force is very small and weak. His air defenses are there, but I don't think they would pose a significant challenge. And again, you know, there's always the psychological aspect of war. If I was a Libyan pilot and I was told that if I fly and attack my own people, that the chances are the United States sooner or later will make sure that that doesn't happen again, I think that could have a very ameliorating effect on their desire to carry out Gaddafi's orders.
And if we don't, John, if we don't do the thing that you're talking about the no-arms situation and so on, is it possible that in that situation, although he seems to be having his back to the wall, he's trying to attack the east now and so on, if we don't do something like supporting the no-fly zone, is it possible that Gaddafi could come out of this situation the winner?
I think it's very unlikely. But look, predicting these things and the outcome is a very difficult business, and I'm very reluctant to. I believe in ultimately that the people prevail. I believe that ultimately they have thrown off the shackles of this brutal dictator, and that they will prevail over time. The question is, how long and how many innocent people are going to die before that event happens? And I think that that time frame could be shortened by responding to the requests of the people who are fighting and dying in Libya as we speak to impose a no-fly zone so that they can't be shot at and killed from the air.
It does underline the fact that issues of foreign policy and so on do impinge on the elections in the United States to a tremendous extent, really. Once again, foreign policy is top of the page.
I think so, and I think that we have a wonderful opportunity here to help democracy take place in a part of the world that a lot of us didn't expect it anytime soon. I think that we are seeing social networking such as Facebook do tremendous things, and there's great danger of extremism taking over in many of these countries. But overall, I think that this is a day for us to rejoice with the possibility of democracy emerging in the Maghreb and the entire Arab world.
John, thank you so much for being with us. You're wise.